Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at tsf.tech.
So, welcome to episode 34. We've managed to make it this far. A slightly different podcast today. I'm not joined by Ian. However, I am joined by TSF's newest recruit, who, I suppose, Lucas, it's not really fair to call you our newest recruit because you've actually been with us a lot longer than that, haven't you, with the internship you did with us. So how are you doing, Lucas?
I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, it's a slightly different recording day as well, so we get towards the back end of the week. I think we've had a positive week over at TSF, so that's always a good way to start, to be honest. So the purpose of today's podcast for everyone who's listening is really to go over Lucas's journey. So, Lucas, I think you've had a really interesting journey. Although you're quite a humble guy when it comes to stuff like this, in terms of how you've progressed from being a student to the internship that you had with us, and then going back to a student, and then obviously becoming a full-time TSF Techer. So, I mean, how have you found it?
It's been an interesting journey, to be quite fair. I joined the University of Manchester in 2017. I'm from Spain originally. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, where I was going to end up. It was sort of a split-second decision to actually come to the UK. Then spent several months trying to find a place to do my internship in second year. Ended up finding TSF through a friend of mine. He thoroughly recommended that I tried an interview with you guys, which I did. It went really well. I got the job. And yeah, I had a really great year, I would say, with the Startup Factory. Had to go back to uni. Got shortened everything by COVID as well. Went back to
that fun bit of the world at the moment.
Yeah, went back to uni, online classes, and now we're back.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that'd be really interesting and sort of going through, what you've been through as a student is, I think for anyone who's thinking about joining a tech startup and is right at the start of the journey. So, what was it that made you choose to go for an internship with TSF rather than going for one of like the bigger companies, like the classic internships that you go and obviously, whether it's Google's, the IBM's, that sort of thing?
So at first I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I had attempted interviews with bigger companies. Found that the interview process wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. I was getting ghosted a lot of times. No replies from recruiters. And then TSF was just a breeze. I literally got through to Alexa within the day. Got an interview immediately. I almost immediately as well within the day got a reply from you guys. And then there was also the fact that while in the interview, you guys kept mentioning how many different projects you guys work on, how relevant the work that I was going to do would be in comparison to bigger companies, where I wouldn't have the same amount of freedom, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's something that when we've done our internship programs before, and obviously COVID kind of put them on hold for the moment, but obviously trying to get guys like you to actually work on real life projects, not just from a learning perspective, which I guess we can touch on as well, just in terms of how you found the experience of what you'd done at university versus what you'd done, obviously, when you start working on real projects. But obviously it gives you a bit of pride that, was it OpenSide that you worked on with us initially?
I did, yes.
And now you can see that, this OpenSide's using the tool that we built and using it with their clients, and it must be quite a nice thing to see that you've actually built something that's been actively used rather than a little tool in a back room at IBM that no one's ever looked at.
Yeah, or just code refactoring, bug fixing, etc. I have a lot of friends from university who ended up at much bigger companies, and their jobs seemed much less relevant within the bigger picture. I got to play with everything from the beginning of building different apps to actually maintaining them. Right now, I'm doing some testing as well, which is something that we didn't really do at uni much. Um, so it's very interesting to see how all of these things that I'm seeing or that I've seen interact with one another in ways that at university I didn't really see either.
So is that really the biggest change from university? So I know you mentioned testing, and that's not sort of one of the main topics that you cover off. Like, what was the main difference that you found? Obviously, just talking of when you did your internship with us, what was the biggest shock to the system? Really, was it the ways of working and being in a company and being in a team, or was it more the actual technologies and how they interacted?
I think the actual technologies, while they were different from what we were using, were fine because at uni we see so many different things that it just becomes second nature to just continue learning throughout and seeing new stuff all of the time. But yes, working with a proper team made a huge difference to me. Knowing that no matter what, people would have my back, compared to some of actually horrible experiences that I've had with team working at university, where people wouldn't show up to meetings, they wouldn't reply to messages, they would just disappear and expect to get the full grade and then let us to do all the work. And here I have Eric, who keeps helping me all of the time whenever I encounter any issues. I've had some stuff that I've had to chat with you guys about before, and I've found help with anything that I ever needed immediately. So it's been really great in that aspect, yes.
I think it's always interesting because I know a few people, and I probably know a few people who thought I was that person at university who wasn't sort of turned up at times and sort of a couple of team meetings and whatnot. But it's a very different culture when you go into a proper company. Whether it's a small company like TSF or even a bigger one. Working in a development team, you are generally striving to get to the same goal. There's no, as much as there might be hierarchies, everyone's at least got the same overall objective of trying to deliver software X and, to budget and to timescales. So you're always going to find a bit more support, which I always think is quite nice. But what was it like then, having had that experience? I assume there was people on your course who didn't do an internship.
Yes. So I'm not exactly sure how those people fared in their last year of university, as I didn't have much interaction with them. They were studying all the time. I was at work. But it was a little bit strange then seeing them later on start their masters or whatever and having still a year left to do.
How
It
did you?
was
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was say, how did you find? Obviously, because you'd actually had practical experience in the real world working on things. How did you find that put you instead with people who'd had that more academic approach? So rather than doing the year in industry, they'd done that academia.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think for me, that year at internship helped me with some organization. It helped me learn how to do things faster. I think I was more ready to just jump into something. Uh, I imagine that my friends who didn't do the year internship um, didn't learn some of the stuff that I did in respect to team building or whatever. They didn't have a lot of workplace experiences. They were just focused on getting their grades and getting a job afterwards. So, in a sense, I can't really say what it is that they missed
Mm.
because I haven't really talked to them about it. But I suppose it might be an interesting question to ask, comparing these things that I did and they didn't do, and see what we all drew from it.
So obviously, when you've had those different experiences, and obviously those people have gone on to do masters or whatever they're doing now. Obviously, you've very nicely, and obviously we've welcomed you back with open arms in terms of getting a job afterwards. How did you find getting into tech as a junior with a degree in software engineering? How did that feel versus how you were getting when you were applying for your internships?
I think when I was applying for my internships, there was this pressure to actually get the internship because otherwise I would have to change course units, and I didn't really want to have to do that. Um, from the beginning, I thought that an internship would be a great experience to have, so I applied to several places. Didn't get very far with most of them. Those that I did eventually ghosted me, never replied, or just outright rejected me, which was disappointing. But in
Mm.
comparison to actual job searching, there was this more, uh, there was a greater pressure to actually get a job because now you're all grown up. You're an adult. You have to do adult things like get a job, like pass those interviews. So I did want to apply to the startup factory from the beginning, but I also wanted to have some of those experiences of applying to other places. So I got in contact with some people on LinkedIn. I did a couple of technical challenges,
Mm.
tried some interviews, read a few of those help books for that prepare you for those questions. Um, it was overall different in the sense that now there was a bigger um, need for that job, for those roles. There was a greater desire to do better.
Mm.
Um,
So I guess there's quite a lot of competition in terms of looking at development roles. I mean, just in Manchester, there's so many software companies, people sort of like TSF in terms of smaller software houses versus, the big companies that are there. So it must have been what was it about sort of working with like startups and the smaller projects rather than necessarily going to an IBM, because obviously you're obviously technically capable enough that we wanted you back, so I'm pretty sure they'd have taken you on as well. So what was it that made you want to work with startups rather than necessarily with a big company?
I think for starting in the job market, working with startups is perfect, and especially the startup factory, because what we do um, is so broad in a
Mm.
way that no matter what it is that I'm doing, I'm gonna be learning new stuff constantly. I'm gonna get more experience. So and for startups, you also get to see all of these different ideas and how they're built from the ground up, how people come up with them, which was really interesting when I first started, and it still is interesting
Mm.
now to me.
That's good, because it's one of the things that we obviously do is we want to work with interesting people who've got interesting ideas, and I think it also means that then there's interesting work for you guys to work on, so that we're constantly getting new inquiries and giving you guys obviously the input into projects as well, which I guess, and I'm obviously we're sort of guessing at this point really, looking at a bigger company, maybe don't get that amount of autonomy and that amount of input into from the very start of inception of a project through to its completion. So is that one of the things that you're really interested in, or is it sort of the more
Mm,
the camaraderie of a smaller company versus, there's hundreds of teams spread across many, many, many countries?
I think both, because some of my friends are working in teams of few people, but within companies that have a billion of those kind of teams, just working on a billion different things. Just some of them to maintain a database, some of them to just maintain the front end of their applications. And then what we do is a little bit of everything within a small and really glued team that just gets to have their input into everything that we do. And that's really liberating in a way, knowing that, hey, while you have ideas, they will be listened to.
I think that's all part of the process, really. We invite all our startups to pitch to the full team. The full team gets invited. We do the retrospectives to make sure that everyone in the team has a voice, everyone gets heard, everyone takes a turn at running the retrospective as well, so it's not just my voice constantly running these things. And I like to think that, and it's obviously great to hear that that's the impression that we obviously gave you in your internship and made you want to come back. So obviously we'd like to finish these things with a little bit of advice for people. So almost what advice would you give to yourself, both when you're a student looking at internships and obviously when you start looking at into the job market and wanting to take that first real step into, as you put it, being an adult. What piece of advice would you really want to give to yourself to really steer you, or if someone was to ask you a question around why did you go and work for this small company in Manchester rather than a Google or an IBM?
I think the advice for myself as a student would be to calm down a bit. I was very anxious at the time about everything that was going on, very unsure about mostly everything. And I think that that's fine now. I can see it was fine. I shouldn't have made such a fuss with myself about it. So it would have been nice to not necessarily take things slower, but be calmer about the things that I was doing back then. And I think that that applies to now as well, a little bit. But now, mostly, I think I would have liked to take a little bit of a breather after everything that happened at university that last year. Obviously, online learning was a little bit not great. Um,
Mm.
so I would have liked to have a little bit more time to just settle down, calm myself down, breathe everything in before just finishing exams and going straight into looking for jobs. Um, I think it would have been fine to just have a few days there to breathe myself. Um, Other than that, I think um, if you're gonna have an internship, if you're gonna look for a job, just make sure that it is something that sounds interesting, that appeals to you, to what you want to do. Obviously, money, if it matters to you, make sure you're getting paid, whatever. Um, just be sure that what it is that you're doing, that you will enjoy it. And it can be hard to make sure of that before you go in. But just make that extra effort to make sure that that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I think
Because
that's a
yeah,
I think that's a really, really good piece of advice that I think a lot of people sometimes miss with an internship or don't get the same vibe off is from people that I've spoken to when they did internships is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to an IBM, a Google or I don't know, whichever big company it is to do an internship with. But that's not necessarily the path that you want to take, and making sure that you get the most out of the year that you spend with the company, very much like you did, and Radu, who was with you at the time,
Mhm.
I think like every one of our interns has, is really try and get the most out of what you're doing, immerse yourself into that company as if you're an employee, because, and especially with a smaller company at times, you're probably easier to feel like more of the team, just because by nature of how they are, they don't really have the capacity to treat people differently. So everyone gets treated the same way, which is obviously one of the reasons that I carried on working at TSF. And obviously it's one of the things that I'd like to think was a positive impact on you, and hence you came back.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I've had friends who really hated the companies that they worked at, and they're still working at those companies right now, which is obviously horrible to just hear about. So yeah, that's why I wanted to bring that up. Just make sure that everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead with whatever it is that you want to do.
I think that's really good advice, Lucas. Well, thank you very much, Lucas, for your time today. I think we've just about got to the end of our little script and what we said we were going to go through. So thank you very much, Lucas.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure we're going to get you back on another one very soon.
Oh, I can't wait.
I'm sure you can, but thank you, Lucas, and thank you to everyone that's listening.
Goodbye.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@startupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.